Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the way in which the government seem to be trying to hide one of the most visible signs of the Brexit trade barriers, the mile-long queues of traffic trying to get through our major ports, which in itself is only the tip of the iceberg. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the most recent PMQs, a Tory MP from the Brexit blighted county of Kent stood up to say that the roads of Dover are clogged up. Did she offer her apologies for pushing Brexit and suggest that the Prime Minister do the same? No, not a bit of it. Without a hint of shame, she said, but it's got nothing to do with Brexit. This is EU red tape. Well, if it was to do with EU red tape and not at all to do with Brexit, I've actually got a couple of questions. First of all, if the purpose of leaving the EU was to get away from EU red tape, and we've left the EU, we've got Brexit done. Do you remember that? We've got Brexit done. Boris Johnson keeps saying, got Brexit done. How come we've still got a load of EU red tape then? Because I'm going to have to say, I've said it before, many people have said it before, I'm going to have to say it again, right? If we're still complaining about the things that Brexit was supposed to deliver us from, Brexit clearly wasn't the solution, was it? But also, another question, how come it only happened when Brexit happened, all this EU red tape? How come these are the sorts of procedures that exist with every other country that is not both part of the single market and customs union as well? Bit of a poser, isn't it? But in reality, not only is this because of Brexit, it's not EU red tape, it's World Trade Organization red tape. No, not the World Trade Organization. Brexiteers positively wet themselves over the prospect of WTO rules, which, by the way, we followed inside the EU as well as outside. But the single most important WTO rule concerns what is termed most favoured nation. This is the idea that you cannot treat one country more favourably than another without a formal treaty setting out these trade arrangements. So to put that in the context of Brexit, because we have not formed a customs union with the EU is not allowed to ignore customs controls on British imports. Or rather, if they do, then they have to do the same for everyone. Now, customs controls are a barrier to trade. And so you do not agree to drop them without getting something in return. It is a negotiating lever. If the EU were to drop custom controls for everyone, it would somewhat weaken their hand when it came to their trade negotiations. Bottom line is, the EU applied controls to British imports because we did not negotiate a treaty that allowed them to do otherwise. Within the World Trade Organization rules, you know. That was our decision, not theirs. They were happy enough to carry on with the customs union, our decision. So you can call the Brexit bureaucracy WTO red tape if you like, because that's literally true. You can call it Brexit red tape, because the red tape was a consequence of Brexit. Wasn't there before, is now. You can even call it UK red tape because the UK chose a trading arrangement that meant by international law this red tape was required. But it is objectively, it's not a matter of opinion, it is objectively not EU red tape because the EU was happy for the UK to remain in the customs union and the single market when it comes to that. For example, let's give you a little example here. Let's say Nigel Farage found a dusty old lamp, gave it a bit of a rub, might be worth a few quid, and got 3 wishes from an emerging genie. And he wished the EU would disappear up its own arsehole, because that's what he wants. He wants the EU to disappear. Don't like it. Fine, it's gone. All just individual countries in Europe now. The border bureaucracy would still remain in place because that third country border with the EU would just turn into a third country border with France or with the Netherlands or with Belgium. Exactly the same paperwork. Actually, no, worse paperwork. Worse, because you're talking about Belgium would have different procedures. France would have a different set of rules. Netherlands have a different set of rules. I mean, they do anyway because we're a third country. You know, but those checks, those delays would still be there because the paperwork would still be there. In addition, these queues are way worse than anything we had last year. This is partially down to the fact that unlike last year, we are actually implementing customs controls at our end now. And you might think, oh, how does a delay on stuff coming into Britain affect stuff going out? A delay in one direction across a very watery border especially creates a delay in the opposite direction as well. Like, if it's taking a long time, for example, for the ferry to load up, it's going to take longer for that ferry to get over there to bring the stuff back. Do you know what I mean? So whinge and whine as much as they like, these Brexit charlatans in the Tory party are not going to make these trade barriers go away by blaming the EU. because there is nothing the EU can do about it without breaking international trading rules, and they're not going to do that. So what are the government going to do about it? Because if the queues look bad now, what's it going to look like later this year? I mean, we don't just expect higher levels of trade to be attempted later this year. That in itself would make the problem worse. The fact that it's February. It might be busier than January. It's nowhere near as busy as it's going to be. It's going to get busier and busier as the year goes on. But we've got new trade barriers coming online later this year as well, just to add to the mix. The government is supposed to be implementing our own standards controls this summer. It is likely they will not do so, but at the moment, they insist we are. So we have to work on that assumption. At the moment, not doing it means we're already breaking international laws because we're not applying them. So far, the world's major economies have more important things to bother about, but there must come a time when we need to apply them. And standards controls are way more problematic than customs controls. But like I say, the government can and probably will delay those checks again. Like they already have done several times. Why wouldn't they do it again? But then there are the biometric checks coming in supposedly September, assuming no more delays. This is not something the UK government can put off. It's nothing to do with them. This is a massive problem. I say it's nothing to do with them. Of course, if they were to help implement it sensibly, that would help us. But we can't delay them. Not our decision. Big problem. Now, you sometimes have to wonder, what it is that ministers really understand about Brexit. International trade, complex affair. And politicians will never understand the first thing about it unless they listen to experts. The current government do not like listening to experts because they come up with all sorts of inconvenient objections to wreck our country's trade. So a combination of laziness, intellectual limitations and fear of facts means that most ministers actually know very little about the consequence of Brexit. Many people just assume they're lying about this and trying to hide these things. And actually, in many cases, they just genuinely don't know themselves. They're just ignorant. But it would be ludicrous to suppose they know nothing at all. They must at least know that the level of trade is going to be massively reduced because we can no longer handle the same level of traffic through our main port. It takes too long to process that traffic. The Financial Times reported on Logistics UK, citing independent modelling which talked of queues of 29 miles later this year. Obviously, this is not remotely sustainable. Can you imagine the headlines? Cannot happen. On its current course, Brexit is basically imploding later this year. And as much as many Brexiteers try to shift the benefits of Brexit away from trade and towards more intangible things, like pink fluffy unicorns, most people are practical enough to know that trade matters. It matters for their jobs, it matters for their incomes, it matters for their general standard of living. We've already seen from the past decade the Conservatives can reduce our standard of living without most people realising. If it's done slowly enough, you get someone from 2010 and then you dump them in 2022, they notice the difference. But you do it slowly over 12 years, with enough rubbish poured into their heads via their client journalists, then they can get away with it because people just adjust and adjust and adjust. But very visible signs of what Remainers warned about years ago is pretty bad news for Brexit. So if the government can't lower our trade barriers, and they've no intention of, then they must hide the consequences. Various groups talk about the government needing a plan to deal with the biometric checks or other aspects of our marvellous aim to have a brand spanking new digital border. But the plan the government are really interested in is one that hides the queues. They can't have 29-mile queues. They can't have that. And even if they can't hide the drag on trade, most people don't look at economic data anyway, let's be honest, at least they can hide the queues. Remember last year when we just left the single market, Brexiteers kept saying, where are the queues then? Where are the queues? And I kept responding, well, where's the traffic then? Where's the traffic? Because that's the thing. In order to claim that trade has recovered from Brexit teething problems, you have to demonstrate that our levels of value of trade have bounced back. Lorries don't set off for Dover to get stuck in a queue for days on end. They first need to check that all their documentation and registrations are sorted. They need to know that when they get to the port, they can go straight through. Even then, they're delayed for several hours, but they need to be able to get straight through. They won't even set off from the warehouse until it's all sorted. And that is where you will see a lot of the delays. Only you won't see them because the media don't go investigating the situation at warehouses. So keeping lorries held up at the warehouse isn't a problem for the government because it's not that visible. Then the lorry parks. You know, those are a little more visible because they didn't exist before Brexit. Didn't need to. But again, journalists tend not to investigate lorry parks. What good are images there? Even if it looks full. So what? Isn't it supposed to be where lorries are parked? Of course. Before Brexit, those lorries weren't parked at all. They were on the road and moving. The reason the lorry parks exist is because if you put them on the road, they wouldn't be moving anywhere. They would just be causing tailbacks. At Dover, Folkestone, whatever. So that is another way of hiding the problem. Basically, the government are going to need more places to stuff the lorries away from the A20. That's what they're going to need. They're going to need to build more and more areas to have these static lorries away from the road and therefore not contributing to the queues, at least not visibly. But although at least one Brexit-pushing Kent Tory MP is trying to claim that the chaos ensuing in her county has got nothing to do with leaving the single market and customs area, her local media, Kent Online, has taken a rather different view. See, instead of interviewing deranged half-wits who somehow got themselves elected to Parliament, they have chosen to listen to people who work in logistics. These people are quite clear what is causing this, just as they are equally clear how and why it is going to get worse yet. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.